The Senate will come to order. Senator Rivera, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Aguilar. Balmer. Baumgartner. Brophy. Cadman. Crowder. Grantham. Guzman. Harvey. Heath. Herpin. Hill. Hodge. John. Johnston. Jones. Kafalis. Kerr. King. Lambert. Lundberg. Lundberg.
Absent. Senator Lundberg is present.
Marble. Newell. Nicholson. Renfro.
Excused.
Rivera. Roberts. Scheffel. Schwartz. Stedman. Toktrop. Todd. Uleberry. Zenzinger. Madam President.
Here. With 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused, we have a quorum. Motion to adopt the journal. Senator Uleberry.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the reading of the journal of Friday, January 17th be dispensed with and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You've heard the motion. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion is adopted. Majority Leader Heath.
Oh, President Schaefer's not here yet?
No.
Okay.
Committee reports.
January 16, 2014, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy, after consideration, the Mayor's Committee recommends following Senate Bill 26 be referred to the Committee of the Whole. Favorable recommendation with the recommendation will be placed on the consent calendar. January 16, 2014, Madam President, the Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends the appointments be confirmed. Members of the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority for terms expiring October 1st, 2017. H. Webster Jones of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, serve as a representative of the Yampa White Drainage Basin and Planning and Development appointed, and Roy Ellsworth Heald of Colorado Springs, Colorado, serve as representative of the Arkansas Drainage Basin appointed. January 16, 2014, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy, after consideration, the Mayor's Committee recommends the following Senate Bill 25 be amended as follows, and as so amended, be referred to the Committee of the Whole. Favorable recommendation with the recommendation will be placed on the consent calendar.
General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Aguilar. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for purpose of considering the general order second reading of bills calendar. Senator Aguilar will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 19?
Senate Bill 19 by Senator Stedman and Representatives Moreno and Janal concerning the state income tax filing status of two taxpayers who may legally file a joint federal income tax return.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 19, and I move the report of the Committee on Finance.
To the Finance Committee report.
Thank you. The Finance Committee report amends the effective date applicability clause to allow this bill to apply to amended tax returns. Both state and federal law allow taxpayers to go back 3 years in time and amend prior returns, and so the effective date would accommodate that. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion to the Finance Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 19 concerns our income tax code, and specifically the manner in which certain taxpayers will be filing their income tax returns. Long ago, the state of Colorado made a policy decision to couple our state income tax code to the federal income tax code. And as a result, anytime there's a federal tax policy change affecting income tax, it comes home and it flows through to Colorado taxpayers' state income tax returns. Whenever Congress changes a deduction or something like that, it does impact our revenue that we receive under our state income tax because of our policy decision to couple and link our state income tax code to the federal code. Senate Bill 19 deals with a recent policy change last October from the Internal Revenue Service. They issued a tax policy guidance helping tax preparers and taxpayers understand how a recent U.S. Supreme Court case would affect tax filing procedures. Because of this, I have introduced Senate Bill 19 to do some cleanup on a bill I passed last year with your help and on our state income tax code. Last year, you may recall, we passed the Colorado Civil Unions Act. And Section 117 of the Colorado Civil Unions Act contained a prohibition against the filing of joint income tax returns by couples in a civil union. And I'll just read from the statute. It says, "The General Assembly finds that current federal law prohibits the filing of a joint income tax return by parties who are not considered legally married under federal law." Well, thanks to the Supreme Court's decision in Windsor versus United States, federal law has changed, and our Colorado revised statutes no longer contain a completely accurate assessment of the federal law in this regard. The IRS last fall issued a policy guidance regarding the ability of these couples to file joint federal returns, and the question becomes, how are they going to pay their taxes at the state level? Just as Colorado has long linked our state income tax code to the federal Internal Revenue Code, we have also had an existing rule in statute that says if you file a joint return at the federal level, you will file a joint return at the state level. That can be found in Colorado statute today, and what Senate Bill 19 does is clarify and reinforce that that remains the law and the rule in Colorado. And in fact, the bill amends our state income tax code to make your method of filing your federal income tax return the determining factor for how you will file your state return. Currently, our income tax code refers to the taxpayer's marital status. And what Senate Bill 19 is doing is saying instead of marital status, we will use your method of filing your federal return to determine how you file your state return, preserving the longstanding rule that you file the same way at both levels. So all this bill does is make a slight change to the Civil Unions Act to remove language that's no longer quite accurate and is in fact a little bit confusing under today's modern realities, and does some cleanup within the tax code to preserve that rule of filing your returns in the same manner at both levels. I think it's a simple cleanup bill, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, we heard this in Finance Committee last week, and still just some outstanding questions. I'd like to explain my no vote and some ongoing confusion over this bill. I heard testimony that said this bill was necessary because current legislation, current law prohibits it, and yet Department of Revenue has received a ruling saying it's okay for same-sex couples to file jointly. If that's the case, why do we need another bill? If it's not the case, is Department of Revenue actually acting illegally? Either case, I think, needs to be clarified here. The second issue, maybe more importantly, we heard a lot of testimony about the importance of this bill because of the chance for filing jointly will reduce some taxpayers' tax burdens. And very specifically, an amendment was put onto this bill allowing amended tax filings for the last 3 years. Folks, I don't know who would amend their tax filings if it wasn't because they wanted to reduce their tax burden for the last 3 years, and yet we have a no fiscal impact from the analyst. I spent a lot of time with the analyst trying to get better information about why exactly there's no fiscal impact. I understand some current year stuff, but with 3 years, if we can go back, if people can go back and amend their filings for the last 3 years, the only reason to do that would be to reduce your tax burden, hopefully get a refund. So I just can't see under any economic principles, and I have a little bit of a background in economics, I don't see how we come up with the assumption that there is no fiscal impact. So I still would like some further questions to that until we can get that answered. I think this is rather confusing legislation and have to vote no.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I was not in the committee, and so I'd request some information from the sponsor on this issue of why why allowing sponsors to or taxpayers to go back 3 years if there's no fiscal impact in the first place. Can you give some explanation as to why that amendment was put on there?
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment merely amends the applicability clause. The ability to go back 3 years in time is part of our existing tax code. Anybody who has some reason or some error or some change in circumstances that would enable them to go back and amend 3 prior years' worth of income tax returns has the ability to do so under current Colorado law. What we're doing is taking this clarification of the law and saying for people that are looking to go back 3 years, these clarifications will apply to those 3 prior years. But it's not creating the ability to do so. That already exists.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm still a little confused on that. If there's absolutely no reason for doing that, why was the amendment there? I mean, I am told that many constituents or many people had contacted other members and said, we would like this because we think we can save some dollars on our income taxes. That's just not correct at all?
Senator Stedman.
Thank you. And I think people, I personally know couples that have already gone back 3 years and amended their prior income tax filings. And I imagine that Senator Hill is quite correct that they did so because there is some advantage to them in doing so. And whatever advantages our income tax code offers to taxpayers, I hope they are working diligently to file an accurate report, to work with a professional tax preparer if they have a complicated return, and take advantage of whatever the law offers because it's there for all to use fairly. And, I think everybody agrees that taxes aren't terribly popular, but unfair taxes are even less popular. And I think this is trying to make taxes a little more fair. Now, as to the fiscal note itself, this bill is not going to require the Department of Revenue to do anything different than they do today. They will be receiving joint tax returns on the form that already exists, that they already accept, they already know how to process. No new processes will be put in place, no new requirements that don't ordinarily happen whenever there's a change like this and a tax policy change occurs at the federal level and people have those consequences come through to their state tax return. So there is no additional workload, nothing that the Department of Revenue has to do new or different with this bill. Now, as far as tax liability and the amount of actual taxes people are paying, there may well be changes. However, those changes are all taken into account in our Legislative Council and OSPB quarterly revenue estimating procedures. And I verified with the fiscal analyst after the committee hearing last week that, in fact, the December revenue forecast that was produced by our economists in the basement took into account federal policy changes that occurred last year, as they always do, and made those whatever adjustments and reductions in revenue from people being able to claim prior year advantages. That has already been taken into account into our revenue estimate, and so this will have no impact on the revenue estimates of how much general fund income tax payments will be made. Nothing new for the Department of Revenue to do, and any changes in overall tax liability have already been accounted for.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me try to interpret what I believe I just heard. And that is that because some other area of government is going to account for this cost difference, and it is, this bill, Senate Bill 19, is changing how some taxpayers can fill out their tax forms, which will yield a difference in what they pay. And I'm not arguing whether that's just or not just. What I'm arguing is that I don't have a fiscal note that makes a bit of sense. Because the sponsor has very clearly stated that his expectation is that some people will pay a different amount of tax as a consequence of Senate Bill 19. That's the bottom line. With Senate Bill 19, it places a different category of taxpayer who will be filling out a joint return as opposed to individual returns, which will yield a different tax liability. And I'm not trying to argue whether that's just or unjust as far as what their tax payment will be, but I am completely appalled that the fiscal note says no fiscal impact. When you pass a bill that yields a different amount of tax revenue, well, if the sponsor would like to clarify, I'd sure like to gain some additional knowledge. Thank you.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you. And Senator Lundberg, the one point I would take issue with in your statement was when you said it was as a consequence of Senate Bill 19. That's not true. People are already able to file these joint returns. If you go to the Colorado Department of Revenue website, you will see they already have guidance on there saying, yes, this is how it's going to work. You may do this today. This bill is not enabling joint returns. This bill is clarifying contradictory things in statute with regard to certain taxpayers filing joint returns. But their ability to do so already exists. This bill doesn't enable it. And so when you said it as a consequence, the revenue will change, that's already happening whether this bill passes or fails. That's the important thing to understand. That's why I characterize this bill, and I think it's accurate, as really being a cleanup bill to make some adjustments to the language in last year's civil unions law and to make some adjustments to language in the state income tax code so that it no longer refers to marital status and instead follows the established current law rule of saying however you file your federal return is how you will file your state return.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the sponsor would be so kind as to describe to this body why he insists that this doesn't change anything, because that's just the way the rule is today. If I understand it correctly, that's because of an emergency ruling that the Department of Revenue made saying to these particular taxpayers, you can now file a joint return. Now, that was an emergency ruling. There are two things. One, it's temporary. Senate Bill 19 is permanent. That makes a significant change. Secondly, it was an emergency ruling. That means that it's not gone through all of the process. And I believe it was an emergency ruling, and we can get into the particulars of the merits of the bill, but right now I'm arguing and I'm wanting a good fiscal note before we proceed with our debate on this. I don't believe we have that. I believe we have a fiscal note that was artfully crafted so that there's apparently no impact, and yet we have taxpayers who are saying, oh, I want this because there is fiscal impact on me, on my tax bill. That is not, in my opinion, it is not accurate to state that Senate Bill 19 makes no change in the policy. Senate Bill 19 makes the change permanent. Nothing is reflected in the fiscal note. Nothing. I'd like to hear some more discussion on this, but I believe ultimately we need to insist that we have the facts before us before we proceed with this debate.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just some clarification here. This won't change the rate you pay on income tax, 4.63% on your income tax, but I did hear from Department of Revenue, and I'm still waiting for a list of these. There are a set of credits that should be adjusted based on this filing, one of which I do remember in particular was the wildfire mitigation tax credit, which was dependent upon your ability to file married filing jointly. So I would love to see some more of those as well. I think there are a list of credits here that will change, that will affect the revenue into the state of Colorado if we do pass this bill.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Crowder. Sorry, Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can tell, this is a somewhat confusing bill, especially to me. If the bill, in fact, does not take away or benefit any individual, I'm not sure why exactly it's there, other than to, in my opinion, what we have basically is this is counterproductive to the Constitution. I believe that we do have a civil union situation here in the state, but our Constitution does differ from this somewhat. So I guess what I would need is additional clarification as to why I understand Senator Stedman's idea about a cleanup bill, but I would like to see some additional information on this, for the fiscal note. But I would like to, if it does not help anybody per se or does not hurt anybody per se, I'm not sure why. Is there some ulterior situation here that I don't see? But until I get that clarification, I think I would have to vote no on this. But nothing personal, Mr. Stedman.
Senator Grantham. Senator Lundberg.
Thank Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go back to the concern I have that we don't have the facts before us. And it's imperative that we have those facts, and it's imperative that fiscal notes be accurate. And it's quite apparent that Senate Bill 19 will have a fiscal impact. Yet I have nothing to go by on the fiscal note. No fiscal impact. It does say, well, maybe. Actually, it says, in addition, Senate Bill 14019 replaces husband and wife or both, excuse me, I'm wrong paragraph here. Legislative Council has not yet received a response from the Department of Revenue regarding any possible costs associated with this bill. Well, right there, I see possible fiscal impact, but I want to know, what are we talking about? And I don't want to be fed this line that there's no fiscal impact, and then be told, well, that's because of an emergency ruling that was put in place that made it so already. Excuse me, but the Department of Revenue doesn't have the authority to make such determinations permanent. They may have the authority to put an emergency ruling in place for a limited time, but that doesn't alter the fact that Senate Bill 19 will have a significant change in how some are filling out their tax forms and what they'll be paying. And it's important for us to have accurate fiscal notes. Madam Chair, I have a request for a new fiscal note. 5 of us have signed it. And I expect the fiscal analysts to come up with fiscal impact, not just a reiteration of what I consider to be inaccurate and inappropriate information for this body.
Thank you, Senator Lundberg. We're going to take a senatorial 5 and have a discussion with the fiscal analyst here on the side. Majority Leader Heath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we lay over Senate Bill 19 until we get a new fiscal note.
Senator Heath.
I move we stand in recess, if this is the proper motion, until we get a new fiscal note.
Thank you, Senator Heath. So the Senate will stand in recess until we have a discussion with the fiscal analyst, and we will reconvene once that discussion has occurred. The committee will come back to order. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 19? Senator Stedman.
Thank you. I renew my motion for Senate Bill 19.
You've heard the motion. The motion before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 19. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Senate Bill 19 passes and is adopted. Senator Heath. Majority Leader Heath, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Senate Bill 9 lay over until Thursday, January 23rd.
Senate Bill 9, the motion is to lay over Senate Bill 9 until Thursday, the 23rd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Senate Bill 9 will lay over until January 23rd. Senator Heath. Majority Leader Heath. Oh. Is it Rise and Report? Shouldn't he be moving that we rise and report?
Yeah, so we need to rise and report, then we'll do a moment of personal privilege here.
Okay. Rise and report. Yes. Majority Leader Heath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move we rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam President. The committee has met and had Senate Bill 19 under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
January 21st, 2014, Madam President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report that in consideration of the following types of bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 19 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered and placed on the calendar for third reading, final passage. Senate Bill 9 laid over until January 23rd, 2014, retaining is placed on the calendar.
There is an amendment on the desk. There's an amendment that will be on the desk.
I move for adoption of the report.
We will wait for just a moment till we take up the Committee of the Whole amendment, and then we'll adopt the report. So now there's an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read amendment to the Committee of the Whole 1?
Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 19. Senator Harvey has moved to the report of the Committee of the Whole to show that the following amendment to Senate Bill 19 did pass. Amend printed bill strike everything below the enacting clause of substitute section 1 in the Colorado Revised Statutes 3922-107. Add subsection 4 as follows.
Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move Amendment 001 to the Committee of the Whole amendment. Members, if you look through Senate Bill 19, throughout the bill, it talks about taxpayer spouses. That's what's currently in state statute. Talks about a husband or a wife or both. Talks about a spouse. Go through the bill. Married individuals in the marriage, married individuals who file a separate return, individual in the marriage, a husband or wife or both, a husband or wife, spouse, a married individual We have an 8-page bill that does nothing but strike the word marriage out of state statute. This is a direct attack on the institution of marriage. There is no reason that we would have to do this piece of legislation if there wasn't such a complete and utter attack on the institution of marriage in the state of Colorado and in this body. There is no reason to do that. We could do what 6 other states in the country have done by implementing similar statute to what Senator Stedman says is the intent of this bill, and simply put in there what is known as the Wisconsin Act. That Wisconsin has put in place in their statute, simply saying if the federal taxable income of 2 individuals of the same sex who are married under the laws of another state or a foreign country, but whose marriage is not valid or recognized in Wisconsin, it says in Wisconsin. In this bill, it says in Colorado. The state constitution specifies that only a union of one man and one woman shall be valid or recognized as a marriage in this state is determined on a joint return. Their taxes shall be determined on a return in a form determined by the executive director, which they already have done. As we've already heard through executive order, not executive order, but emergency action, the department is already doing this. They already have the forms in place. Provides for the allocation of their income as reported on their joint federal returns to each of them as individuals. This is what 6 other states have been able to do already, and they've been able to implement this very easily. What Senator Stedman is purporting to be wanting to do with this legislation. If what Senator Stedman is purporting that he wants to do with this legislation, then let's do it with this amendment. We do not need to strike spouses, husband, wife, married couples out of state statute simply to implement an easily understood piece of legislation. If the intent is something different, which I believe it is, then let's vote against this amendment. But as purely to allow individuals to file jointly, then I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 001.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, I'll ask for a no vote on the Committee of the Whole amendment. And what Senator Harvey said about the state of Wisconsin is true, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, one of my stated intents in bringing forward Senate Bill 19 was to preserve our current state policies, which 1, link our income tax code to the federal income tax code, and 2, our current policy has a rule, and you can find it in statute, that however you filed your returns at the federal level is how you will file your returns at the state level. I am preserving that existing tax policy in our income tax code. Now, the state of Wisconsin actually turned its back on that simple to follow rule that however you file federally is how you will file your state return, and instead they passed something like the amendment on the floor, and they directed their Department of Revenue to create a special schedule. They call it Schedule S. I have a copy right here. A Schedule S only for same-sex couples filing income tax returns so that they may take their joint return and use Schedule S as a worksheet to sit down and go through filling out all these lines to separate themselves back into 2 separate forms. It's sort of like, saying we want to have a special disadvantage and inconvenience for one class of taxpayers, so we're going to depart from our normal rule of simply filing the same way at the federal level and the state level. We're going to create a burden on one particular group at the expense of the Department of Revenue that's going to have to create these forms and process these forms. Why? Because of disfavor towards the affected group is the only thing I can come up with. It's sort of like going back to the days of establishing separate restrooms or water fountains for different classes of citizens. It doesn't make sense that we don't allow everyone to participate fairly, pay their taxes in an equal manner according to generally accepted rules. Now, Senator Harvey is correct. Senate Bill 19 does remove references to husbands and wives and marital status from our state income tax. from our income tax law. It makes our income tax law neutral as to taxpayers' marital status. And instead, it just continues that existing rule of filing the same way at the state level that you filed at the federal level. There are some that, when you've heard the argument, that somehow this is, undermining the sanctity of marriage for it not to be cross-referenced in our state income tax code. And folks, let me tell you, the institution of marriage has a lot of other threats, but how it's described or embedded in our income tax code, I don't think this really rises to the level of something that's an attack on marriage. How we write our tax codes is the prerogative of this legislature, and I'm proposing to do it in a way that is clear and understandable for taxpayers and their accountants and their CPAs, and follows existing rules that tries to treat everybody fairly and equally, because I think that's our job here. For that reason, I ask for a no vote.
Senator Lindberg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I will be supporting this amendment.
How long have you been listening?
President. Madam President. Yeah, well, let's move on. The sponsor said he vote no on this amendment, and he says he sees no reason for it. Well, I see a very solid reason for it, and that is it meets constitutional muster, whereas Senate Bill 19 does not. Because regardless of how Senate Bill 19 tries to carve away the concept of marriage from joint filing, at the federal level, that is the very point of joint filing. That's it. Married couples can file jointly. That's how you end up with a jointly filed federal income tax form. That's it. And somehow we're trying to contort that in violation of Colorado Constitution that states what marriage is, and say, well, but when it comes to filing your income taxes, it doesn't matter what the Constitution of the state of Colorado says. We're just going to ignore that. Just move along. Kind of sounds like the fiscal note of this bill. Just move along. Don't bother with the details. Trust us, it's all there. No, it isn't. The policy that the Colorado Department of Revenue put in place as an emergency policy is in violation of the Constitution, because it ignores the fact that a joint filing is for married couples. That's the federal rule. And it has to be the term married couples. Civil unions don't apply. That's the other weird ambiguity of all of this, is it doesn't really fix anything. It just makes it a little bit more of a complicated mess in direct violation of the Constitution of the state of Colorado. This amendment acknowledges that disconnect between federal law and state law and says, okay, here's how you can unwind this complicated situation and actually file your forms. Okay, you can file jointly at the federal level, but at the state level you can work through the process to disentangle the numbers to file appropriately in Colorado. That's the only way we should be able to, that's the only way we should approach this, rather than somehow trying to ignore the constitutional mandate that the people of Colorado put for Colorado. It's an amendment that I believe is a reasonable compromise, and I should hope that the sponsor and that the members of this body can recognize that there are times we need to find that which works, find the common ground, if you will. This is some of that common ground. Please accept this as being an appropriate way for this dilemma to be cured. It's the only constitutional way we have before us.
Any further discussion? Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam President. I also ask for a no vote on the cow and want to speak just briefly about the importance of this amendment this week. Yesterday we marched to celebrate equality and talk about a different time in our past. And this amendment specifically asks for both a separate form and an unequal treatment of couples who have been married under the laws of other states that are recognized. And to stand here today, it makes me pretty sad that we're talking about separate and unequal again. And I thank Senator Stedman for taking a very artful and nuanced approach to ensure that we're protecting the state constitution while recognizing a very difficult situation here as we face the conflict of both federal and state law. And so I think he's done it in a way that respects and upholds the Constitution without saying, let's have separate and unequal forms and unequal treatment for folks who have been married under the laws of other states, while respecting our Constitution here in the state of Colorado and finding a way that all couples who have been married can receive some fair treatment under the law.
Senator Harvey?
Thank you, Madam President. Interesting comments, separate but unequal treatment. There is a federal DOMA Act. There is a state constitution that says that marriage is between one woman and one man. That is two separate entities, a marriage and a civil union. That is what is in our state law. We are not creating two separate things with this. We are saying you can file jointly and do it with this amendment. That's all we're saying. But what we are also saying is you will not redefine marriage and strike the term husband and wife from state statute anywhere you can as a gratuitous attack on the institution of marriage. Yes, there are a lot of issues attacking marriage, but none more direct than this Senate chamber over the last 2 years. None. And yes, that is what this amendment is about, is implementing federal statute that has a DOMA law and implementing the state constitution that says there is the definition of marriage is between one man and one woman. If you don't like that, run an initiative. Ask the voters to vote for it. If you have the votes to change the state constitution, do it. But you don't. And don't sit up there and throw out egregious comments like separate but unequal treatment. That doesn't fly here. We're talking about simply allowing civil union partners to file joint tax returns. That's all this is. And if you look at my amendment, it's one page. And you can do everything you want to do in one page. Look at the bill. It's 8 pages long. It's 8 pages, and why is that? Because you have to find throughout state statute where the words marriage might need to be stricken out. Section 3922-107, a husband or wife or both, struck out. Paren 2, a husband or wife, struck out. Let's look at section 3922-104. Strike spouse. Strike spouse. Paren N, Paren I, Paren B. Strike individuals filing married tax returns. Married individual who files a separate return. Go down to B again, further down. Married individuals who file a separate tax return. Individual in a marriage. Let's go on to section 3922-109. Strike husband or wife or both. Strike a husband and a wife. Strike filing married in section 3922-522. Go down to section 3922-604. Strike husband or wife. Strike spouse. Go down to section 3922-605. Strike married. Strike individual. You have to have an 8-page bill and how many sections of the state statute to figure out how to delete marriage, delete husband and wife out of state statute, simply to do what my 1-page bill will do? Unseparate and unequal? The Constitution says a marriage is between one man and one woman. What this bill does is do everything it can to strike out what that means. I ask for an aye vote.
Getting my microphone back up. The question before the body is the adoption of the Harvey Committee of the Whole Amendment 1. Are there any no votes? Senator Stedman, Senator Aguilar, Senator Ulibarri, Senator Jones, Senator Guzman, Senator Cafalas, Senator Nicholson, Senator Heath, Senator Kerr, Senator Zenzinger, Senator Newell, Senator Hodge, Senator Toktrop, Senator Todd, Senator Johnston, Senator Schwartz, Senator John. Please add the President. With 16 ayes, 18 noes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, that Cow Amendment is lost. There are no further amendments on the desk. The Committee of the Whole report is Senate Bill 19 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 9 laid over until January 23, 2014 and retaining its place on the calendar. Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam President. I move for the adoption of the report.
Is there any discussion? Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam President. It's not customary to speak a whole lot before this vote, but I'm going to tell you why I'm a no vote. There's 2 reasons. One is I'm not at all satisfied with the process that was conducted during the second reading debate for 2 things. One is the fiscal note. What I saw was just a brick wall of take it, period. Secondly, I tried to get recognition when the vote, right before the vote was called, and wasn't recognized. I don't believe we completed our second reading debate on this at all. I'm a no vote for approving this.
Question for the body is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? Senator Lambert, Senator Lundberg, Senator Harvey, Senator Baumgartner, Senator Crowder, Senator Shuffle, Senator Cadman, Senator Rivera, Senator King, Senator Grantham, Senator Marble, Senator Roberts, Senator Balmer, Senator Herpin, Senator Brophy, Senator Hill. With 18 ayes, 16 noes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. Majority Leader Heath.
And I now look up and I see that Senator Schaefer has gone with his class, but which is too bad. I do think they had a chance to at least hear that debate. Senator Schaefer was here with his daughter's fourth grade class, and if he were here, we would recognize him and thank him for bringing his daughter in her class. But seeing as how that can't happen, we will thank him anyway. And I think Senator Crowder has something.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam President. We have some special guests here today I thought I would introduce you to.
Senator Crowder, why don't you move that we proceed out of order for a moment of
I make a motion to move, proceed out of order, please.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate will proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege by Senator Crowder. Senator Crowder.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to introduce to you all some very important guests from the San Luis Valley. What we have here today is future farmers of America who make a very positive difference in the lives of students by developing their potential for leadership, personal growth, career success through agricultural education. I'm honored to have them here with us today. This FAA unit is out of Sargent School District. The teacher is Ronna Cochran. Ronna, would you stand up, please? Here's Ronna. The sponsor is Donnie Wentz, who's not only the sponsor of this, but he's also the lead. How would you say it, Donnie? You're the lead reporter of the Co-op Coffee Table in Monte Vista, Colorado. Donnie's a sponsor. Right next to him is Tanya. We'd like to welcome you all to Denver. What you've seen today is a process of which we go through in our government, which is a very valid and very respectful process. But we thank you all for coming to the Capitol today. And I know it's been a little bit longer than we thought it would be, but I would encourage everybody to take a few moments and meet them on the way, because they are the future of agriculture. And I must say they are some of Colorado's, if not the nation's finest people you will ever meet. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today in the chambers. Message from the House.
January 21st, 2014, Madam President, the House has adopted transmits here with House Joint Resolution 1003.
Introduction and consideration of resolutions.
House Joint Resolution 1003 by Representative Exum and Senator Stedman concerning the commemoration of the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam President. I move House Joint Resolution 1003, and I request that it be read at length.
Mr. Majors, would you please read the resolution at length?
Whereas the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929, graduated from Morehouse College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1948, graduated from Crozer Theological Seminary in 1951, and received a Ph.D. from Boston University in 1955. And whereas Reverend Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, a 13-month protest beginning December 5th, 1955, against the segregated city bus lines. And whereas the Montgomery bus boycott led to the integration of the Montgomery city bus system and is widely credited as the beginning of the civil rights movement in America. And whereas in 1957, Reverend Dr. King was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide leadership for the burgeoning civil rights movement. And whereas between 1957 and 1968, Reverend Dr. King spoke over 2,500 times, wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles, led protests, helped register African American voters, was arrested over 20 times, was awarded 5 honorary degrees, was named Man of the Year by Time magazine, and became the symbolic leader of the African American community as well as a world figure. And whereas on August 28, 1963, Reverend Dr. King directed the March on Washington, wherein more than 200,000 Americans gathered in the name of equality and civil rights, and which culminated in Reverend Dr. King's historic I Have a Dream speech. And whereas the leadership of Reverend Dr. King was instrumental in bringing about landmark legislation such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited segregation in public accommodations and facilities and banned discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which eliminated remaining legal barriers to voting for disenfranchised African American voters. And whereas, in 1964, Reverend Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his tireless and selfless work in the pursuit of justice for African Americans and other oppressed people in America. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's 13 years of nonviolent leadership ended abruptly and tragically when, on April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And whereas Reverend Dr. King's birthday is a federal holiday in the United States and a state holiday in the state of Colorado, which is celebrated each year on the third Monday in January. And whereas on Monday, January 20th, 2014, we celebrate the 28th anniversary of Reverend Dr. King's holiday. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, hereby encourage appropriate observances, ceremonies, and activities to commemorate the federal and state legal holiday honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. throughout all cities, towns, counties, school districts, and local governments within Colorado. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to President Barack Obama, the Congressional Black Caucus, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, and Colorado's congressional delegation.
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, thank you for your attention this morning to this resolution commemorating the holiday that commemorates the birth date of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It seems a little odd doing this today on the heels of the celebration yesterday of that holiday. I know many of you were here in Denver for one of the country's larger commemorations of this holiday, our annual parade, beginning at the monument to Dr. King in Denver City Park, ending, of course, here at the Civic Center. And it seems sort of fitting that this is how we honor the man, by gathering first in a public place and exercising our First Amendment rights of association, assembly, and speech, and that we end here at the seat of government in the Civic Center, bringing our grievances to the light so that government may address them. And that was certainly Dr. King's legacy. His work through his deep beliefs in the tenets of nonviolence and of social disobedience to bring about social change is something that not only marked a generation but changed a nation forever. And we are forever in his debt for the leadership that he showed and the courage that he showed in advocating for change and taking a stand against injustices. Think about it. You know, when he was born, there were laws on the books in Georgia that said persons licensed to conduct a restaurant shall serve either white people exclusively or colored people exclusively, and shall not sell to the two races within the same room or serve the two races anywhere under the same license. That kind of official state-sanctioned segregation was the norm that he was fighting against. And there are plenty of examples of the kinds of written laws that his legacy and his work in the civil rights movement helped change, and unwritten laws that also he helped change. We're all familiar with his work on racial justice issues. We're all familiar with the dream that he espoused from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial 50 years ago last fall. But I thought on this occasion of his birthday it would also be fitting to point out that racial justice wasn't really his only concern. He actually was concerned deeply with economic justice and issues of poverty. He was a strong supporter of the labor movement, and in fact, he was in Memphis in April of 1968 to support striking garbage workers when he was assassinated outside his hotel room. One of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes, and I know, Senator Aguilar, you may share this favorite as well, is during his advocacy for access to health care for all. And he said, one of the most, of all the forms of inequality and injustice in health care. I'm sorry, let me start that over. I'm butchering the reading on this. All of the forms of inequality, of all of them, injustice in health care is the most shocking and inhumane. And I bring that quote forward because it's an issue we're still working on, and people are still marching to try to create a more inclusive, accessible, fair, and compassionate healthcare system, just like we're trying to create a more inclusive and compassionate and fair society for all of our citizens in general. And so when you talk about Martin Luther King's legacy, don't think just of racial justice, but think of injustice writ large in healthcare, or the injustice of who serves in foreign wars, or who is incarcerated at alarming rates. It's funny that this morning, as I'm preparing to present this resolution, I pick up this morning's paper and find there's a story here in the Denver Post, a national story actually, about a national study that says by the age of 23, 1/2 of all African American men in this country will have been arrested in their life at the age of 23. We know through studies that were done by our own Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice that Colorado has a serious problem of minority overrepresentation in our criminal justice system. People who are black or brown or different seem to be treated and show up with different frequency in our criminal justice system. This is just another example of where Dr. King's dream and his quest for justice and equal treatment for all remains unfulfilled and remains a task very much on the agenda for us, the Senate of the state of Colorado, to make our state a more perfect state so that our union can be a more perfect union. I want to thank you for your attention this morning. This resolution is something that we haven't always done every year, but something that the House wanted to do and something I gladly agreed to assist in, because we are at that 50-year anniversary of the famous March on Washington. We are at a point in time where we're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We also live in a time when the Voting Rights Act slowly being dismantled. We have to remain ever vigilant in the defense of our liberties, and I think this day and this remembrance of Dr. King and what he has done for our society is a fair reminder of the duty and the responsibility we all have. And so I thank you for your attention, and I would encourage your aye vote for House Resolution 1003.
Any further discussion? Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gosh almighty. I'm channeling Kevin Lundberg. I'm sorry, Madam President. Senator Lundberg. Please, members, give me a little bit of time as well. In 1807, the British Commonwealth abolished the transatlantic slave trade after long years of perseverance against deep enchantment of slavery in the economy and the empire. Disappointing setbacks and failures were suffered on many occasions before the British parliamentarian and philanthropist William Wilberforce and his colleagues savored the sweet victory of which they had so long prayed, hoped, and tirelessly worked. In his young years, Wilberforce had been deeply influenced by his friendship with John Newton, former slave ship captain turned clergyman and the author of the famous Christian hymn, Amazing Grace. In time, Wilberforce became a Christian, and it was this personal conversion experience that caused him to embark on a 20-year-long battle against the practice of slavery. He died in July 29, 1833, just 3 days after hearing that the passage through Parliament of the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 was assured. The British Empire had finally rid itself of the scourge of slavery. In 3 short decades, a continent away, a similar battle would rage against the evil of slavery. But in this conflict, brothers would take up arms against brothers. Shortly before his death, William Wilberforce had penned these words: "America, as a Christian and free country, cannot but entertain that slavery is alike incompatible with the law of God and with the well-being of man." Upon Civil War battlefields, Wilberforce's words would be tested, but in the end, the country would prove them true. Slavery puts man at war with God and with other men and would no longer be tolerated in a Christian and free America. President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which was followed soon thereafter by the ratification of the 13th Amendment. In 1865, slavery in America came to an end, but the battle of freedom was just beginning. 64 years later, Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta on January 15, 1929. He was destined to rise up in the spirit of Wilberforce and Lincoln and take up the same banner of the cause of liberty and justice. This time, the fight would wage against segregation and racial discrimination. Dr. King went forward with unyielding conviction that God had created all men equal, taking his stand and strongly proclaiming that it was up to good men of conscience of every color to act selfishly and speak truthfully without guile in order to bring about the end of segregation in the United States. It is that each year on the third Monday of January, Americans commemorate the birth and the life of Martin Luther King Jr. As befits the occasion, we remember his work and influence in the civil rights arena, and we honor him, the man behind the deeds. Recently, a good friend of mine urged me to read the letter authored in 1964 by Dr. King while he was being detained in the Birmingham jail. I commend that letter to you, as it conveys Dr. King's heart. In it, he answers criticisms leveled against him by pastors, peers within the Christian community. Admittedly, I had never read this lengthy letter written from the Birmingham jail, but as I pored over its contents, I was reminded of Dr. King's generational ties to the church. His godfather and father were both Baptist ministers. From this legacy came the high value he placed upon freedom and equality, and the reasons why he bristled at injustice. When he heard the words liberty and justice for all, he heard the clarion call to righteous men everywhere to defend the least and the last and the lost. In his letter, Dr. King reflected upon the lives of great men and women of character whose words and deeds stirred within him a hope that one day, from every corner coffee shop to courthouses across America, the sweet sound of free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last, would ring out. While it remains true that Christians themselves have not always flawlessly embodied the ideas of their faith, their impulse to promote by effort the principles of universal benevolence and pursuit of the public good has often wrought dramatic and positive change. So I ask you, can we properly honor Dr. King without also honoring the principles and ideals that inspired him? Please consider this quote from Dr. King's letter. I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond the boundaries of their hometown, and just as the Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus to the far corners of the Greco-Roman world, so I am compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my own hometown. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. King continues some paragraphs later to address the characterization of his actions as untimely, as well as his critics' assertion that he and other demonstrators were willing to break laws. Listen to the answer Dr. King gives his detractors. This, wait, has almost meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. We have waited far more than 340 years for our constitutional of God-given rights. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. You, speaking to his critics, expressed a great deal of anxiety over a willingness to break laws. One may ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. One is not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. I would agree with St. Augustine that an unjust law is no law at all. Now, what is the difference between the two? How does one determine whether a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law of God. An unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. All segregation statutes are unjust because segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. Hence, segregation is not only politically, economically, and sociologically unsound, it is morally wrong and awful. From Dr. King's remarks, that are we to conclude about the foundations of justice, that a man's keeping or breaking of any law is subject to his own views of the law as to whether it is just or unjust? Or does Dr. King justify acts of civil disobedience based upon the premise that supreme truth has been established by God and exists over and above man-made codes? It would be hard to argue, I think, that Dr. King thought anything other than that just laws derive its authority from the divine. Dr. King continues, of course, there is nothing new about this kind of civil disobedience. It was evident sublimely by the refusal of the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to obey the laws of Nebuchadnezzar, on the ground that a higher moral law was at stake. It was practiced superbly by the early Christians who were willing to face hungry lions and the excruciating pain of the chopping blocks, rather than submit to certain unjust laws of the Roman Empire. In our own nation, the Boston Tea Party represented a massive act of civil disobedience. Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless effort of men willing to be co-workers with God. Martin Luther King was a man who tirelessly co-labored with God and men to win the struggle against segregation. He eventually took some satisfaction in being branded an extremist for this label placed him in the company of his Lord and with men throughout the ages whose lives had not only encouraged but inspired him. Was not Jesus an extremist for the law? He said, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand. I cannot do otherwise. So help me God. And John Bunyan, I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. And Abraham Lincoln, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. and Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the perversion of injustice or for the extension of justice? I'm thankful to God that some noble souls from the ranks of organized religion have broken loose from the paralyzing chains of conformity and joined us as active partners in the struggle of freedom. They have acted in faith that right defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Abused and scorned as we may be, our destiny is tied up with American destiny. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God will embolden in our echoing demands. Dr. King was clear about the moral things of life and was unashamed to testify to them and to God, from whom he believed that moral law comes. He was careful not only the right thing, but to do it for the right reason. And he placed the cause to which he had devoted himself into the providential hands of God. Dr. King ends his letter with these few words. One day the South will know that when the disheartened children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best for the American dream and for the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in their formation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Let us all hope that in the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away with the deep fog of understanding, will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities, and in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood, Martin Luther King, Jr. Members, thank you for letting me read that. This was actually given before the House of Representatives on January 15th, 2009 by then Representative David Schulteis. I've had it in my desk ever since then. This is the last term I'll be in this chambers. I didn't want to have the opportunity to go by without having the chance to read this one more time before this body. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Senator Ulibarri? Any further discussion? Question before the body is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1003. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, House Joint Resolution 1003 is adopted. Senator Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam President. I request that the morning roll call be added as co-sponsors for House Joint Resolution 1003.
Any objection? Seeing none, the morning roll call will be added as co-sponsors to House Joint Resolution 1003. Announcements. Senator Baumgartner. And Senator Brophy.
Thank you, Madam President. And as you've known for the last week and a half, there's been Senator Troffroth, myself, has been coming down here asking for money for the National Western Livestock Auction. At this time, I would like to introduce one of the recipients that benefited from the money from the National Western, and then I'd like to turn it over to my colleague to announce the other one. So at this time, Madam President, if I could get Megan Webb to stand. Megan is a graduate student in meat science at Colorado State University, where her research focuses on beef flavor and quality, along with international beef trade and policy. Megan is fifth-generation agriculturist, where her family raises Angus beef from the pasture to the plate. Megan is currently serving as a National Western Beef Fellowship intern, where she has been given the opportunity to assist with coordinating livestock shows and events. Megan is thrilled to be part of the National Western Beef Fellowship program and thanks both the House and the Senate for their sponsorship and support in furthering their education. In her words, the relationship between policy and rural America is critical to the success for the future of the American farmer and rancher, and I'd like to welcome her to the chamber. Thank you.
Senator Brophy.
Thank you, Madam President. And members, it's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you Morgan Weinrich. Now, Morgan is from Yuma, Colorado, and it is a real honor for me to introduce somebody from Yuma and have something nice to say about the town of Yuma here in the chamber. Morgan grew up in Yuma, and her family is involved in agriculture. Her dad is a manager at one of the large hog farms in that area. Morgan has been showing market sheep all around the country and is now a freshman at Colorado State University, where she is studying animal sciences and journalism, and she is the recipient also of one of our scholarships. She's also interning at the National Western Stock Show. I look forward to watching Morgan with her future reporting on agriculture and all that's great about America when she becomes a journalist, and I have something nice to say about the wonderful people from Yuma, Colorado. Thank you for being here, Morgan.
Senator Tucktrap.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm not up here to talk about the stock show money, although I'm still waiting for it. I do have some bad news to tell you. Last week, I told you about Senator David Wattenberg. He passed away yesterday morning about 4:30 a.m., and memorial services will be forthcoming. It'll probably be up in his area, and we will have a memorial service here. And Senator Baumgartner, who replaces him after one other senator, will give the memorial services. And just remember him in your prayers and his wife and family. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It threw me off. Yeah. Madam President, yeah, it threw me off for a second. I'm following my colleagues this morning. What can I say? One other announcement, or what I wanted to do is, we talk about, and that's hard to follow, but we've talked about the stock show and giving money. This is proof of where your money's going, continuing their education, continuing kids. And we stand down here all the time and talk about it's for the kids. Well, there's two of them. There's two of them. So please give freely. Senator Toptrot and I will continue to take up throughout the week. One other announcement, Madam President, Colorado Cattle Association is having their lunch across the street at the Scottish Rite Masonic Center. It's right over here on the corner. Many of you know where it's at. And I think they'll be meeting in the old Supreme Court chambers about 2 o'clock this afternoon if you'd like to go over and say hello. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam President. And just a brief update that transportation will be meeting at 2 o'clock rather than 1:30 this afternoon to hear 2 bills. Thank you.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a quick note, the announcement for the Childhood Obesity Prevention Caucus meets tomorrow, 7:15 in the morning. Breakfast is serviced. House Committee Room 112. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Majority Leader Heath.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Toktroff was kind enough to mention Senator Wattenberg. and we will hear more about that. And thank you, Senator Talktroff, for that. A friendly reminder to everybody, your green per diem reimbursement sheets are due today, so if you've not already done so, please take a moment and turn that into the assignable clerk. We've also not mentioned a huge victory last Sunday with our Denver Broncos. It was truly a great day, and our Peyton Manning was magnificent in victory, as was the whole team, and we got February 2nd to look forward to. A whole bunch of announcements. Senator Todd already mentioned the Transportation Committee will be at 2. I'm told JBC will also be at 2. Local government is being moved back to 3 o'clock, and Senate Bill 47 will be heard on Tuesday, January 28th instead of today. Senator Johnson asked me that we will have no finance meeting today. Also, just for the future, we're going to be scheduling committee meetings on Tuesdays, starting at 2 rather than 1:30, so that the caucuses can meet and have ample time to do their business. So we will be scheduling committee meetings on Tuesdays henceforth at 2 unless you're told otherwise. So for planning purposes, we will move that. Judiciary, Senator Guzman said we will have judiciary upon adjournment today anyway, even though we're running late. So judiciary will meet on adjournment. And with that, I think we've got all the announcements. And Madam President,
We're going to do a quick message from the House, and then we'll take that motion. Message from the House.
January 21st, 2014, Madam President, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted the advisory statutes, House Bills 1078, 1053, and 1019.
Okay, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move the Senate adjourn until 9 a.m. Wednesday, January 22nd.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will stand adjourned until tomorrow, 9 a.m.